duties. So if I said like the vaccine mandates, what you would probably go to, would be a good position, is we should force people to take the vaccine to help the rest of society, to not put them in danger.
I'm a collectivist. I believe that there are certain things that folks should do for
the betterment of society,
betterment of the group. I think that transitioning does not have a negative impact on the group.
Let's assume that every single person was to come be gay, or they want to be trans. They are no longer, like, it just spreads so crazy that they just do not want to be straight anymore. They don't want to have kids. They don't want to bear responsibility. Even if we came to a dead end, human extinction was about to be the thing now. We were about to come to an end. Would you be okay with that?
Dude, I frankly don't think that this is a very realistic situation.
Salazar Perez, aka Easy, is here on this college campus to debate these brainwashed college students. He made his way to the University of Oregon, wanting to debate about transitioning children. And of course, this trans person right here, this dude right here, wants to debate him on it. Let's see how this goes down.
Socialists on campus.
Okay.
You know, I'm involved a lot in campus politics, and I'm also a transgender woman.
Oh, wow.
I have a lot of friends who are transgender. I personally didn't start transitioning until I was 18.
Okay.
Many of my friends transitioned earlier than that, and I think I can kind of understand how you come to this viewpoint if you are not a part of that community or proximal to that community. But the way that I perceive it, the way that my friends perceive it, the way that pretty much everybody I know who has transitioned before 18, the people who, you know, this sign is speaking about, it is a universally positive thing. It is, to these people, a matter of life and death. I know people who, frankly, just would have killed themselves if they did not receive this health care, this gender-affirming care. So I don't necessarily see it as something that's being forced down people's throats. Most of the time, honestly, parents try to dissuade their children from taking these measures, from taking these actions. I see it as something that is being somewhat autonomously pushed for by these, you know, children. And we can argue if, like, children have that autonomy or what is informing those decisions. But we have seen in states that have banned gender-affirming care for minors increases in suicide rates of from a minimum of 7 to a maximum of 70%. So, I mean...
Can I push you on that a little bit?
Sure.
Because how would you know that that's not a causation-correlation fallacy within those suicide rates? So like when you, let's say you found 10 counties that didn't affirm it, and then you see a higher suicide rate, how would you know that's directly attributed to this?
Well, I mean, I can't necessarily prove correlation for anything. You can only really, like, kind of look at, like, these two things. But I mean, if we're looking at transgender children and we are looking at transgender health care, and there is an increase in transgender children committing suicide after transgender health care is banned, I think that's a pretty fair thing to draw correlation from.
Are you pretty like confident or like familiar with the studies that come out for this topic?
Pretty decently.
Because that's what I like to get into, is like the specific studies. Can we agree that sociology itself is like it's a soft science? So it's rooted in not verifiability, but just like affirming a specific bias and building off of that.
Yeah, so I actually can't agree with that, and I think that's a misrepresentation of science and statistics. Well, some of these things, like psychology, sociology, are soft sciences. They are built off of statistical analysis. So once you have a certain amount of a sample size, you can actually kind of extrapolate conclusions out of the way that that sample size is changing its behavior over time in relation to policy. So you can, like, there is, like, you know, definitely theoretical, higher level things that are involved in, like, women, gender, sexuality studies, ethnic studies, social studies, but a lot of these things are also grounded in statistical fact.
Okay. Can I tell you my position to see if you can attack maybe something that I have? Okay, so for me, I would say if there was a scientific consensus, like it was scientifically proven that this doesn't produce any bad results, even from, I think from a moral standpoint, maybe I would have a disagreement, but from a just objectively like fact that we can both observe, I wouldn't really have any contention with it. I think with the scientific consensus though, you could find studies that affirm the belief you want, and then I could find exact opposite studies to that, and there's no consensus within that.
For anything, you know.
Right, but
so,
but don't you think with sociology, sorry, and then I'll let you go. With sociology though, do you know that 60 to 70% of sociological studies can be replicated?
Can't be replicated, is
cannot.
what you're saying?
So like if we look at a minimum gene concept in a lab, you can test it over and over and over again. With these studies, 60 to 70% failure of replicability.
I mean, I'm not particularly interested in litigating the scientificness of sociology as a field. I mean, most of this isn't even necessarily coming out of academic sociology. It is coming out of statistical analyses of suicide rates in particular demographics in certain states. Those things are universal. They're not what's the opposite of objective?
Subjective.
They're not subjective, they're objective. You can look at the suicide rates of self-described trans youth in a state like Oregon, in states like California, where there isn't those gender-affirming care bans, and you can look at the suicide rates of transgender minors in states like Texas and states like Florida, and you can compare those numbers and see a dramatic difference.
So can I push you on the studies for the suicide thing? Because I think that's one thing that I debate this for like a living. So people always throw the, did you know that people are more likely to commit suicide if they don't transition? But what studies actually show, even if I were to just match your like sociological studies, is that throughout all 3 phases of transitioning, the suicide rates either stay the same or they increase.
I mean, yeah, we can pull out.
That's why I don't like pulling study bros. Yeah. Like I don't like, study bros. But the thing is, I just like having honest conversation, which is like, if I let you get away with like saying that, I would feel immoral, because I know that there's a lot of studies that would show that through all 3 phases of transitioning, the suicide rates either stay the same or increase. And also, the studies that you would probably appeal to, which I would love it, like if you want to send me studies after too, I can look at them, is that a lot of these people that are biased towards it, they're not going to look at the long-term effects of it. So I can grant that if someone was to transition right now and they were miserable, I can grant that they would feel good the first year, for sure.
I'm 3 years in. I'm feeling a lot better.
And I like meeting people that they go through this and they're not like, I don't want them to live a miserable life. Right?
I mean, essentially, every transgender person I have met in my life has been happier after they have transitioned. And you know, there is like selective confirmation bias in that, but I'm pretty confident that I know more transgender people than the average person does.
Yeah, and that's good, because throughout your circle you might meet a lot of happy people. But I just want to look at it from like even just taking a step back and looking at the overall thing. Would you say that if a kid, like let's say 10 years old or 11, they wanted to get on puberty blockers because they didn't feel like they were on the wrong gender, they wanted to start making the changes, do you think that would be morally okay? And even scientifically, if I were to, like I said, I kind of appeal to those stats, if you could just grant them for the sake of the conversation.
So I do think that that would be morally okay, because I think what we are talking about here is essentially, let's say you have a 10-year-old who is transgender, and we can like debate on if that person is actually trans, but for the purpose of this conversation, that person is a woman trapped in a man's body. What you have when you go through puberty is you have effectively irreversible changes to your body through testosteronization that, like, you can't really get rid of those things. You can't get rid of the way that your bones develop. You can't get rid of those effects. So me personally, and with many of the people I know, specifically transgender women, would have had higher quality of life if we had the option to have puberty blockers as minors before puberty. The hardest part of my life, easily, was puberty, because there's just some way that like our people are wired where those hormones, the way that our natural hormones are made and distributed into our bodies, doesn't react well. I was deeply suicidal as a 12-year-old, as a 13-year-old, as a 14-year-old, as a middle schooler, you know, a 7th grader, a 6th grader.
And I didn't know. You grew up around here too?
I grew up in Bend.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't know that I was trans until I was probably 16 or 17. But once I started taking HRT, I noticed a massive decrease in my suicidality, in my depression. I've had a much happier life since then. And that is something that I have seen probably among, I don't know, the 30, 40, 50, 60 transgender people I know who take HRT and have transitioned. Some of which have been taking that since, like, I know a person who probably has been taking HRT since the age of 13, received top surgery at the age of 16, and is living out a far happier life than he would have if he continued down the track that nature had intended for him.
Okay, so can I ask you, because you don't have to share what you don't want, but like you took HRT?
Yes,
okay.
I currently
do,
yes.
Did you go through puberty blockers and then to there?
No, I did not go through puberty blockers because I was not aware of that as an option.
So they just jumped you like right into the cross-sex hormones?
I went into Planned Parenthood, and I personally requested. I asked for.
Whoa! Holy cow! Planned Parenthood does that? what? Planned Parenthood contributes into the transgenderism movement? I mean, I'm not surprised in that, oh, I didn't think they would morally not do that. You know what I mean? Like, of course, that Planned Parenthood, they're all about that type of shit. You know, they're the ones that give out the abortions and stuff. Why wouldn't they do this? So from a moral standpoint, I'm not surprised that they would do that. But just like, I'm just more surprised in that I thought they were only exclusively dealing just with women and wanting to get rid of their pregnancies. I didn't think that they were also involved in transing people.
And this is the case with most trans people, is we go into the doctor's office, we go into Planned Parenthood, and in Oregon, so it's informed consent, pretty much what happens is you sit down, they tell you everything that's going to happen. The good, the bad, the mixed.
Wait, real quick, was there an evaluation done, like, of your, like the psychiatric evaluation done before?
A quick, like, hey, are you, like
a survey?
Deeply, yes.
Oh, wow.
Like a little, like, are you crazy? Are you suicidal? You know, that type of situation.
Wait, so this is actually important because...
Hey guys, I hope you are all enjoying.
Yeah, you know, that's the question I would ask too. Like, did you get the psychiatric evaluation? Because if you could just go into Planned Parenthood with this stuff and they just give it to you, and it doesn't sound like it was a deep, you know, that's another excuse that I've heard from transgenders and the people who are pro transgenderism movement. They will say, you can't just go in there and then they just treat you. No, they have to go through all these steps to make sure it's really right for you. And if it really is right for you, then they'll do it. But it sounds like, well, you could just walk into Planned Parenthood, you just take the survey, and then bada bing, bada boom, you could get your HRT.
Back into the video.
Do you see how easy it was for you to get on cross-sex hormones?
Yeah, it was great for me, and it was great for everybody else I know. Putting those bureaucratic processes in front of it, I mean, I just personally don't believe in forcing people to go through those processes to receive this care, because that is delaying what, in my perspective, is life-saving care. Like, for example, you wouldn't ask somebody to get a mental health evaluation for a boob job, and that's like it's a gender-affirming care for a cisgender woman. You wouldn't ask a diabetic patient who wants insulin to go through a psychological survey, because that is life-saving care. I think those are both situations.
I wouldn't consider boob jobs a life-saving care. I'm just saying I wouldn't consider it that. In terms of the diabetic patient, though, I mean, but there are tests that you're given. They test out and they could see, oh yeah, you're you know, I forgot, but your levels are high, your sugar levels are high. Like, they could tell if you're pre-diabetic and stuff. Like, they could tell that. That's an objective test they give you. It's not just an evaluation. It's like, do you think you have diabetes? And it's like, yeah, I mean, I kind of do. Like, yeah, they could get your symptoms. Like, they go, oh, what kind of symptoms are you suffering from? And then they tell them, well, I'm feeling like this and like that. And then they give you tests, actual tests. And then they could see, yeah, look, it looks like you're pre-diabetic. You might want to cut down on this. I think it's if your, what is it? If your glucose levels are too high. I don't remember. But the fact of the matter is they have objective tests that could tell if you're pre-diabetic or not. It's not just, they're not just asking you a questionnaire.
In which there is a double standard on transgender health care. If we agree that it's life-saving care, then it is not something that you should have to go through 6 months of evaluation, a year, 2 years, like it is in the UK to receive. So if we agree that it's just cosmetic, gender-affirming care, then why is it more difficult for me to receive estrogenizing hormones than it would be for a cis man who has low testosterone to receive testosteronizing?
So do you know, like, according to, because my issue would be like gender dysphoria itself, right? So do you know that according to the DSM-5, gender dysphoria is known as like a psychiatric condition, like
yes.
a medical condition, right?
Yes.
But what they do is they get cosmetic surgeries to fix that.
Yeah, that is.
And you're okay with that,
yes.
right?
Well, I mean,
so then your belief and mine are different, I guess, in that sense. Like, we're debating kind of a different thing. So, for example, your belief is just do what you want. Like, cosmetically, if you just want to do it, just do it. Whereas for me, a lot of these people, trans people, what they'll say is it's a mental illness. They have to get it fixed or else they'll commit suicide. But you're kind of just taking just do it if it makes you feel good.
I mean, I guess there's two parts of that. I do believe in the bodily autonomy of people to be able to control and modify their own bodies to their choice.
Do you actually believe that, though?
Yes.
So do you think
I
women...
think if somebody wanted to do some crazy shit, if somebody wanted to get a giant scarifying tattoo on their back...
Like suicide?
I mean, suicide's a different thing.
How?
I do...
Like, let's say they're
because you're
super miserable.
dead,
I know, but let's say but don't you think at times there have been times where, like, let's say someone's suicidal.
Yeah.
They can't transition.
Yeah.
Do you think that they could be going through so much more misery that it's actually worse than death itself?
I mean, I do believe in state-assisted suicide, or like kind of those legalized suicide practices. I think that killing yourself is different than getting like a tit job, though.
No, I know. I'm not comparing them, but I'm taking the foundational premise, which is bodily autonomy.
Yeah.
That means that it's your body, you can do whatever you want, but then you're kind of setting a restriction, meaning that you would remove the bodily autonomy.
Well, I mean,
Because it's their body and it's their misery.
Okay, there are certain situations, like if you are late-stage cancer, you're in deep pain. Like, for example, a lot of people in my family recently have, they're old, they go into hospice, and they suffer there for months, for years. Those people should be allowed to kill themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that
But what if
is
it was just a kid?
unfulfilling death.
If it was just a kid that couldn't transition and they're miserable, would you think that they should still exercise their bodily autonomy if they want to?
Themselves?
If they wanted to, yeah.
I would much prefer that they exercise their bodily autonomy to transition than their bodily autonomy to kill themselves. I think that you can put moral weights on different actions that people can take with their body. I do put a negative moral weight on suicide because I think it is something that is avoidable in most cases. I think I put a positive weight on gender-affirming care because I think it is something that can prevent suicide in many cases.
What about like bodily autonomy within vaccine mandates?
Well, I mean, that gets into another topic.
So you see how we keep jumping from there's no more bodily autonomy anymore?
Well, I don't
people-
think that we can cross-apply these different sections of bodily autonomy and just assume that they're all going to have the same underlying rules. Suicide is not gender-affirming care. Vaccination is not.
Right, I'm not comparing them.
Yeah.
I'm testing the bodily autonomy foundation.
Well, you're testing the underlying logic.
Right, exactly. But do you see the inconsistency now?
Yes, and I am.
Because what you're telling me, and this is a good thing that you actually have. I like that you have this. This is a good thing. You don't believe in absolute bodily autonomy. People kind of throw this word around, but what you actually believe in is duties. So if I said the vaccine mandates, what you would probably go to, would be a good position, is we should force people to take the vaccine to help the rest of society, to not put them in danger.
I'm a collectivist. I believe that there are certain things that folks should do for
the betterment of society,
betterment of the group. I think that transitioning does not have a negative impact on the group.
Let's assume that every single person wants to be gay or they want to be trans. Mm-hmm. They are no longer, it just spreads so crazy that they just do not want to be straight anymore. They don't want to have kids. They don't want to bear responsibility. Even if we came to a dead end, human extinction was about to be the thing now. We were about to come to an end. Would you be okay with that?
Dude, I frankly don't think that this is a very realistic situation. And also, I like wood.
You like wood?
I like wood, yes. I mean, the thing is, I don't think that this is just such a fucking weird situation to be putting on the table. I don't necessarily know if this relates or ties back into what we've been talking about in a particularly productive way, but I'll still give you an answer.
Wait, can I tell you why and then I'll let you answer? What it's showing that is that there's a duty. Just like you said, there's a betterment for society that we have to prioritize. The betterment of society here is that there's a duty to keep society living.
I do not think that we have a duty to have children or to birth more spawn or to preserve the human race into the future. I think that we have a duty to vaccinate so that we are not putting other people's lives at risk.
But even when you do that, aren't you assuming that there's an objective telos and an objective purpose at the end of that for why we ought to let them be happy or why we ought to help them?
I mean, it's utilitarianism, I'm doing this. I think that that the small minority of people who are anti-vaccine should get vaccinated for the betterment of the common good. I do not think that if everybody were to become queer and not want to have babies,
and we were going to come to a dead
end, would necessarily be against the common good, because I don't think that the preservation of the human race is something that is necessarily in the interest of the common good.
That's so stupid, though. It doesn't make any sense. By the way, I want to give credit to this trans person here for actually engaging in the conversation and not just getting outraged. I want to give them credit here that they, at least, are engaging in the conversation. Where I disagree, though, is they're like, well, and listen, obviously this person has a bias, obviously, because they're not straight. This is not a straight man here. This is a gay man. So obviously they're going to come from this. When Alazar or Easy says, well, what if everyone just became gay and, everyone went extinct, obviously he's going to be like, well, listen, I don't think that's going to happen, and I don't blah, blah, blah. And also, I don't believe in the preservation of the human race. The thing, though, is that, well, if you don't believe that human life is important, that you don't think we should preserve or keep the human race going, well, then who cares if people don't get vaccinated or not? Like, if you're concerned and you want this small minority of people to get vaccinated because it's going to protect other human lives, then I don't understand. So you're not for the preservation of human life, but you want to preserve human lives by protecting them with these vaccines. Same thing with the kids transitioning. This person, he talks about, like, well, you know, they're going to unalive themselves if they don't get the transition. Okay, so you're showing a concern for human life. You want to preserve human life. So you want to preserve this human life, but you don't want to preserve human life in terms of the human race that's going to keep going. It doesn't make any sense.
I think that increasing the quality of life for the people who are alive now is in the interest of the common good. If
he wants a small minority of people to get a vaccine that they don't want to do, they want them to go against their own bodily autonomy for the greater good of everyone, right? Of society. However, you can make the same argument towards trans people. You could tell them, like, hey, listen, you're a small minority of people. Why don't you not do this stuff? Because it's going to be better for society. They might wonder, well, how is it better for society? And it's like, well, women are in much more danger when you allow this type of stuff. You're going to be putting women in danger when you allow men in women's spaces, like such as prisons, bathrooms, locker rooms, in women's sports. This is causing tangible harm to women. And so wouldn't you think it would be for the betterment of society if they didn't transition this stuff, if we didn't make this type of behavior acceptable, if we encourage maybe different types of treatments?
If humanity was coming to a dead end, we all went infertile, we all became, like, gay, and people were happy, people were living their best lives, and then humanity ended 70 years later, I still think that falls under a positive utilitarian framework.
From a utilitarian framework, though, wouldn't it be the way you ground the utilitarian framework is by majority? So if majority decides something is good?
I'm not necessarily following in the policy recommendations of the majority.
So how would you ground them? Because, like, let's say
in the, like, material and historical interests of, like, the majority. So, like, I'm a Marxist.
Okay.
You know? I believe in historical materialism. So when I'm looking at how to do utilitarianism, how to make society better, I'm not just looking at what do inherently the masses believe. Because we live under a capitalist system, sometimes the masses are incorrect. I frankly believe that, like, under my framework, I can put together a pretty good analysis of what is in the interest of the individual and the interest of the collective.
Because I guess what I would say is, like, for me, if I also took on a utilitarian view, and we're both two utilitarians, right? And I say, for me, it's maximizing the greater good for the majority of society. If we found, let's say, there's 100 people in a society, and I want to choose 60 people to prioritize their happiness, but the way they got their happiness was by making the other 40% miserable, you wouldn't really have any contention with that, would you?
No, I would. I actually absolutely would. Because I do not think that, for example, the enslavement of 30% of the population for the betterment of 70% of the population would be something that's morally justifiable. So I think you can hold within contradiction, but also in synthesis, utilitarian values of the betterment of the collective, but also moralistic values of,
even though they're a contradiction, you're okay with them?
Everything's in contradiction. I believe in dialectics.
Is that a contradiction?
I don't
So, like,
know.
if
I didn't make two statements.
If that was a self-refutation, right, then why should I hold to that belief? Because you said everything is a contradiction.
Be more specific.
You said everything is a contradiction. That means that itself was a contradiction.
So the idea that...
so then that would kind of bring you to an arbitrary standard where why should I listen to you, right?
Okay. I'm a Marxist. I believe in dialectics. So that puts together the idea that two things can be in contradiction, two things can be in tension with each other, and you work to put together those two things into synthesis. That's kind of dialectical materialism.
Okay.
So I do think that I can simultaneously hold the positions that we need to do what is best for the masses of the people, for working people in America, in the world, which I believe is socialism. And also hold kind of this idea that there is things that are morally correct and morally incorrect.
Dialectics is, it sounds like it's just a dialectics just sounds like an excuse for people to not be consistent for their worldviews, or at least try their best to be consistent in their worldviews. I know not everyone's going to be perfect, not everyone's going to be 100% consistent all of the time, but I think it's always best to try to be consistent, at least try to. But when you just leave it up to dialectics, well, then it's just like, well, then I guess why should anyone try to be consistent about anything?
And that it's possible that the majority of working people in the world don't 100% have those same moral values. So I can have my own moral values while also having utilitarianism. Even though those may be in contradiction, they come into synthesis with the idea of socialism.
And wouldn't morality, since you can't ground them, right? Because you said you can't ground the morality.
Yeah, also, too, that's something that was partially preached by Karl Marx. It sounds like it was a way for people like maybe Karl Marx or other people to get on board with communism and all this shit, you know, even if it conflicted with their personal moral values. You know, it's a way to allow contradictions like that, you know, for the greater good.
Wouldn't it just be a preference?
I mean, morality is ultimately like something that is subjective. It's up to your ideology and up to your framework. And that is why, of course, like utilitarianism is a amoral ideology. It does need a moral framework to function, because if you are valuing what makes people's lives better, there needs to be an underlying moral framework. So you, as a utilitarian, may believe that it is disadvantageous for people to be gay, for people to be trans, because that spreads ideology that hurts the majority. And that is pointing at an underlying moral framework. I, as a utilitarian, believe that these things do not hurt the masses. In fact, that they
Why don't we do it
liberate
better,
the masses
within
by
that example?
deconstructing the gender binary.
Sorry, I don't like cutting people off, but what if, like, within that example, let's say you thought this was moral, because kids will kill themselves if they don't transition, right? And that's your moral framework. And I had the exact the exact opposite moral framework. So I thought it was good to let them want to unalive themselves. Are we both moral people now?
Okay, so what you're pretty much saying is we both have moral frameworks. Are we both moral people, right?
Yeah.
So I think that...
But mine's the exact opposite as yours.
Yeah. So we both have moral frameworks. I don't think that necessarily makes us both morally correct. I think that we can have our subjective morality, but you still can refer to reality, to what is actually happening in these communities, and extrapolate your moral framework out of that. I like to believe that my moral framework is based in material reality, and the material reality, according to my analysis, is that if trans people, young trans people under the age of 18 do not receive this care, that is life-threatening.
And then, even with that framework, like, since it's all subjective and relative, and it's subject to change with time and culture depending on the context we live in, I could have the exact opposite beliefs and there would still really not be an issue. We would just have a different set of preferences, correct?
Yeah, so what you're saying is that we both have moral frameworks. I just think that your moral framework is not materially rooted and is incorrect.
But what if I said the same thing about yours?
Well, you have the right to say that. I think that...
But neither would be more meritorious than the next, right?
We're not going to agree at the end of the conversation, you know.
And so can I get to, like, where I'm kind of leading to with that? Yes. And then because I'm going to kind of summarize it now. What I'm kind of showing is that there's a lot of inconsistency and contradiction with these beliefs, where people take this subjective framework and they don't actually care about the betterment of society. They kind of just care about doing whatever makes them happy in the moment. And if that were the case, we would have a lot of extreme hypotheticals that I could pose to show the extreme of that aspect and the consequences in the long term.
Yeah, so I guess the thing is, I'm not interested in talking about extreme hypotheticals. I'm interested in talking about material reality.
But
so
there's
2 points there. There's 2 points there, which is, one, I'm interested in talking about material reality. I'm a Marxist. I'm a materialist. I want to extrapolate my moral framework out of material reality. I think that my moral framework is directly correlated to material reality. Second is, oh God, what was the... Can you rephrase what you just said a little bit?
Hypothetical?
It wasn't the hypothetical part. It was the other part.
Oh, that if it's all subjective, it's all going to change with time and culture.
Yeah, I mean...
That there's no grounding for it, and...
There is no objectively correct morality, but we, as a socialist, as a good person, we need to strive to put our morality as rooted in material reality, our moral framework to be as rooted in the material reality and the material conditions of working people in this country as possible. Otherwise, our framework is incorrect and our analysis is incorrect, and what we believe may be moral, if it is not rooted in the average life of people, of trans people in this case, then it is not materially correct. Then it is an incorrect moral framework. And the last part, I remembered what I was going to say, is So I personally don't believe, I'm not necessarily saying that people should be able to do whatever they want. I don't think that you should smoke next to an airplane and a baby. But I think that you can value what the social consequences of certain actions are, what the consequences of individuals doing things is on the collective. I think that, frankly, there is no negative consequence of people above the 18 or below the age of 18 transitioning onto society. If you like what I had to say, and you want to fight for trans liberation, for trans rights in this nation, in this world, you should join the Young Democratic Socialists of America.
Yeah, no, sorry. Sorry, dude. Sorry, bro. I'm not going to be doing that. But yeah, just go to streetdebates.com instead. No one needs to be going to the Democrat socialist bullshit. No surprise. This is at a college, so of course you're going to meet idiots like this guy right here. This brainwashed fool. But again, I do want to give credit that at least he engaged in the conversation. You know, and he wasn't rude about it. He wasn't, you know, he seemed like he was in good faith, even if at the end he's still wrong. So credit to him for that. Again, his worldview doesn't make any sense. I think it does just boil down to, well, first of all, it is brainwashing, because I think he thinks that letting kids transition and stuff is actually saving their lives. And letting people just transition is saving their lives. However, again, even though it is pretty much mutilating of children, because a boy can't become a girl and vice versa. You're just mutilating these children. You're preventing them from going through natural puberty, natural development. There's a lot of children that grow out of this. There's a lot of children who don't really know what they're talking about. They're either brainwashed by their parents, by society, or they're just confused. So we shouldn't allow children to mutilate themselves, all in the name of this transgender ideology. For children, or even for children or adults like who suffer from a gender dysphoria or whatever, I think we should try to seek out other types of treatments, not necessarily just let them live their life as the opposite gender. You know, listen, even if I were to be like Grantham and be like, okay, yeah, this transgender person, you know, like this dude right here, he could walk around as a woman, identifying as a woman all he wants. The part that bothers me is when he wants to go into a woman's bathroom, when he wants to go into a woman's locker room, you know, when there are male criminals who identify as women so they could go to women's prisons, when there are male athletes that are claimed to be women so they could go into women's sports. You know, that's the issue that I have. But since this person is a self-identified Marxist, obviously he views things as the oppression and oppressed. He views trans people as oppressed. And so obviously he's going to say, no, it's important that we trans the people who want to be trans. And if you don't, they're going to kill themselves. And, well, aren't you going to feel really bad about that? And so he's just looking at it from this Marxist lens. But, you know, doesn't really make any sense at the end of the day. But how did you guys think Easy did? How do you guys think Easy did? Leave a comment in the comment section below. Give this video a like if you liked it. If you really liked it, please subscribe to my channel. That'll help me out a lot, especially if you like the video. That will really help me out a lot in the algorithm. If you want to see more content like this, I got a whole channel full of stuff, debates on these type of topics and politics and such, that I think you'll enjoy.